Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. Welcome back to the John Schultz Podcast, Myth of Overnight Success, where we go behind the highlight reel with the builders, creators, and leaders who are shaping our future in real time. Today's guest is someone who truly lives in the intersection of science, business, and impact. Dr. Michael Johnson is the president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute. And before that, he built and sold Visikol, a pioneering biotech company that served every major pharma company in the world. He's Forbes 30 Under 30, a TEDx speaker, and one of the loudest voices championing innovation ecosystems right here in New Jersey. In this episode, we will dive into his journey from lab researcher to tech CEO, the emotional roller coaster of selling a company, and how he's now scaling information across healthcare, defense, workforce, and entrepreneurship all under one roof. We'll also get to his new book, 1% Dad. This conversation is packed with insight, honesty, and a ton of useful takeaways for anyone navigating their own nonlinear path to success. Let's get into it. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
John, thank you for having me. I was looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is going to be good. Good. So, we start out early in life on this podcast because we want to, learn about the full person's journey. So my first question to you is what kind of environment did you grow up in? How did that shape you into what you think you are today, right? Which is an ever evolving process anyway.
It's a great question. The older I get, I always reflect on something that's really important to me and just my upbringing, which are my parents. The more people I meet, the more other folks I talk to about how they grew up, what their parents were like, I realize how big of an asset my parents were for me. I have a fantastic mother and father, always there for me, always pushing me, always putting me in situations where I could build resilience and get stronger and tougher. And even today, if it's 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and I call my mom and say, hey, pick me up from an airport, it's 5 hours away, she'll be there. And not only will she be there, she'll be there with my favorite food and my favorite drink and 30 minutes early. So I've always had fantastic parents throughout my whole life. I have an older brother who's a year and a half older than me. He was always my playmate growing up. So grew up with an absolutely just great relationship with my parents. Father was a teacher. My mother, for our early years, is home with us as kids. And that really set me up for success later in life. And now that I'm a father and a parent, really just think about the impact we have on our kids and really trying to be as intentional as possible. But that set me up for a lot of success and really fortunate for great parents.
Yeah, unconditional love. You have one brother only, or
just one brother? Yeah, older brother.
So I have the same setup as you. I got one younger brother, it's almost the same age difference. I had the same mother that wouldn't have to ask anything; it would sort of just appear. And I always felt like both with my father and mother, the having your back thing. It's a thing.
Yes.
It's honestly. If I go back on every one of the 80 plus podcasts that I've done, whether it's, your parents or someone in your life that you feel has your back, I always say it's that pat that pushes you forward into any and everything that we do. So 100%. Very cool. I know how that feels, and I'm actually feeling it right now as you say it. So, what kind of sports did you do when you were young? I heard, you started, I guess, training when you were 14, and I'm almost embarrassed to say I wish I was you in this, that you have not missed one day of training since. Come on, COVID, nothing? You kept going?
I've always kept going, but I'll tell a story on how that came to be because it is rare. And I say that and people are like, you're crazy. That's insane. But when I was growing up, I was an average kid. I was an okay student, so A's and B's, but I wasn't in accelerated programs. I wasn't in the advanced reading class. I struggled, especially as a little kid, with reading and math and all that. but I always loved science. My dad was an eighth grade science teacher, so always super passionate about that, building rockets, blowing stuff up, always doing something with science. But wasn't a great student. And then when it came to athletics, I also wasn't exceptional. It was the 90s when I was growing up, so hockey was big. We had the New Jersey Rock and Rollers. We had like California roller hockey. I couldn't afford to play ice hockey, so we did a lot of roller hockey growing up, and I liked that. But again, I wasn't a great athlete. But when it came to being about 12 years old, I was watching the movie Stand By Me, and it was like a Saturday, first time I ever saw it. And I'm sure you've seen it. It's classic Americana. These kids go on this adventure, and they have a great time. And at the end of the movie, the narrator says, "You never quite have friends like the ones you had when you were 12 years old." And at the time, I was like kind of a loser. I wasn't good at school. I wasn't good at sports. And I remember thinking like, crap, I don't have that great of friends. Like, I'm not going on adventures. Like, what am I doing? So I was in that like transition from middle school to high school. I started looking around of like, who's cool, who's popular, like what's going on. And my brother was older. So it was the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And I'm asking him about high school and who's cool and who's popular. And he says, oh, it's the high school football team are cool and popular. And I was like, all right, well, how did those guys get there? He's like, oh, well, Mike has been playing since fifth grade. I was like, well, I guess I can't play since fifth grade. I'm already behind the eight ball. And he's like, well, Eric, he's like really good. And he's the captain of the football team. And I was like, well, what's his deal? And he was like, well, he just works really hard. And I was like, well, what do you mean he just works really hard? He's like, yeah, he works out like 2.5 hours a day, gets to practice early. He's going to clinics. He's doing drills. And he never played football before high school. And that was like the light bulb in my brain just like exploding of like, all I have to do is work really hard and I can become the captain of the football team and be cool and get somewhere. So like between seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, I committed myself. I said, I'm going to go play football. Never played football before. I was like 130 pounds, but I was like, I'm going to do this and go all in on it. And from my freshman year to my senior year, I went from being awful, like one of the worst guys on the team, to my senior year, I was captain of the football team with two other guys who would later play in the NFL. And I worked my butt off like every single day in the gym, every single time I can get feedback from a coach or practice or anything. I just went all in. I wound up playing college football, and working out for me became such a pivotal part of my life because it brought me success. And I realized that as long as you put a little bit more effort in than everybody else, you get there earlier, you listen to your coaches, you can achieve amazing things. And I've applied that as I've gotten older to careers and companies and different roles I've had. But yeah, it's 20 years. I still haven't missed a workout since I started on that journey way back when. And it's brought me a lot of success. I've met crazy people in the gym. I've got all sorts of business opportunities from that type of mentality, and really been grateful for that. So yeah, it all started though when I was like in seventh or eighth grade.
You're like a modern day Rudy, who I had on this podcast. Like,
Right.
listen, except you're probably 6'2", 6'3". I mean, he had the height issue he had to deal with as well. At least you had some goods going in, right? But
Right.
I agree. I'm very avid into health and working out, and I feel like it's a lifestyle. And where else do you get really serotonin that's good for you?
Right.
That's dripping all the
Right.
time, right? And in today's day, with social media and stress and cortisol like flowing through our bodies like every second, whatever we can do to counteract that, that's not all the other things that sometimes people do that ease the pain.
Right.
Anything that in the health working out sector, I think is something that everyone should be focused on. And it's fun, like you said, relationships, and I meet all sorts of people in the gym. I almost have like a gym life, a business life, golf life, right?
Right.
Like it's fun to get into ecosystems with like-minded people too, which
Right.
I think people would benefit from. So okay, so you found your inner strength, your core inner strength, which as a young person, not everyone does that. It takes years sometimes to find that, whatever that is that makes you feel you can do it, right? The whole I am enough, you can do it thing, which we
Right.
all suffer from. So like, who would you say some teachers, mentors, and also like, were there any times, during your younger life that, you had serious doubts that helped you get through it, or did the mentors and teachers help you get through it?
It's an awesome question. I've been so grateful for great mentors my whole life. When I stepped into the gym the first time when I was 14 years old, I went with a buddy of mine's dad, and he was an ex-professional boxer. He showed us the ropes. He taught us how to work out in the gym. He took a real liking to us and put a lot of time in teaching us and training us. And then I played freshman football, and the coach put so much effort into teaching us not only to be great football players, but also how to be young men, how to be responsible, how to take accountability for our actions. And anytime someone screwed up, made a big lesson out of, okay, somebody did this, they're going to tell the truth. Here's how they're going to account for their actions. Here's the punishment they're going to take because of what they did. And those lessons went on and on and on. And then my high school football head coach, same thing. Went into college. I played for a fantastic coach in college who, again, focused all on not only being great football players, but also being great young men and going into the world and having a very positive impact. And I've had a number of those folks. And even with the company that I started and sold, I had a fantastic mentor, another football guy who came in and told me the hard things. When I was being an idiot, when I was making dumb decisions, he would tell that right to my face. And it was, hey, Michael, you're being silly about this. This is a terrible decision. And I really respected that and liked that kind of in-your-face feedback. So I've always been very grateful for that. But a question I had until recently is, why was I always on the receiving end of that? So I always felt grateful, but I was like, why did I get this? And now I'm coaching my son's football as an assistant coach. And I see the kids, and there's only a few of them out of 100 who say, how do I get better at this? They come to practice early, they're running around the track afterwards, and I'll move mountains to help those kids. And that was me. I just wanted to get better. So the coaches, I think, saw that and said, I want to help you. And I was always in the receiving end of that because I was so open to the feedback, and it paid huge dividends for me. So I try now is give back as much as I can, but I'm so grateful for that mentorship.
Well, it's like the help me, help you thing, right?
Right.
Jerry Maguire, another
Right.
movie I love. It's like you can only help someone who wants to.
Right.
And, as mentors, as we are now also in the later stage of our career, you want to be successful at helping. Like
Right.
helping feels good when you actually feel you're making an impact. Because I think as you get older, the impact thing, which we're going to talk about a lot of, the impact you've had, which is tremendous, and at a younger age in your career is important. So, all right, you basically had some really good mentors, and besides your parents, I think that's important. I also feel people need to think you could have 20 mentors. Like, it's not one person. You're not seeking out this all-knowing, guru for yourself. You're
Right.
just meeting and learning and valuing relationships in order to have all these different things in your life that might, tap you at any one point in time when you need it, right? Because that's
Right.
really when you need it. And, you went to, I guess, Muhlenberg, which that was your college choice. Good liberal arts school. My wife, daughter, both daughters went to Muhlenberg, so I love the school.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I
Okay.
love it. I love that whole area. Love the school. And then I guess you went to Rutgers, right? After Muhlenberg to study for your doctorate, and obviously you were big into biology. So I'm not, when we're younger, like I know you're a science teacher, but that doesn't mean that's going to be your path. What got you into science? And you know, it's sort of the opposite of entrepreneurship, and we're going to get to where you are with that today. So is it just the way your brain worked, or it's because you were around it? Because like it's interesting to find out like why people choose things.
It was probably because I was most exposed to it growing up. My father, being an eighth grade teacher, he would come home from school. I mean, reeking of chemicals. He was always doing some kind of experiments. He would come home, and instead of the baking soda and vinegar volcano, we would have a volcano with red phosphorus and magnesium in the driveway, just blowing flames in the air, and all the kids would come over. We were always doing rockets. I was super big into taking anything apart, robots, RC cars, whatever it was. So I was captain of the rocket team, middle school, captain of the robotics team. I was always very involved in STEM. I just liked it. My grandpa too. He had always would go over his house for sleepovers. He would give us encyclopedias and tell us like copy stuff from here, draw pictures of solid engines and rockets and stuff. And I always thought that was super cool. So I was exposed to it a lot growing up, and it was always something I was passionate in. But when I did my undergrad studies, I worked really hard at football. I was like, again, an okay student. I had like a 3.4 GPA. I was doing okay at Muhlenberg. But the post-career had never even occurred to me. I thought I'd be a teacher like my father. I thought I'd go in I don't know, teach middle school or high school like him. Never occurred to me because growing up, we were a very blue collar family. Most of our family ran potato chip routes or landscaping businesses. My dad was landscaping in the summer. So I didn't even know what white collar professions were out there. And it never even occurred to me that being a scientist was even a job you could have. I never met a scientist. So my senior year, this is 2011. So like the economy has fallen apart. I'm totally oblivious as a college student. I'm applying to hundreds of jobs pre ChatGPT when it was easy to do. And I didn't get any calls back. So I'm sitting in the dining room like May of my senior year with no job whatsoever. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll go into teaching. And I get a call from North Dakota. So I don't pick it up. I ignore it. And I'm like, let me call this person back. So I pick it up and I say impolitely like, hey, who is this? And it turns out to be Dr. Emily Schaller from NASA. So NASA was one of the jobs I applied for and totally forgotten about it. And it was probably like the coolest, best job of all the ones I'd applied for. But they turned me down like 3 times. And what I realized is they had to hire somebody that was a guy from a liberal arts college in Pennsylvania that did a major in life sciences. And I was like the only one left. So I got this fantastic opportunity to work for NASA through an internship. It was 12 weeks. And she said, do you want to work for us? And I was like, sure. I didn't even know where it was or what it paid. But it turned out it was in Southern California. We were living in Orange County doing research. It was like the coolest job you could possibly have. But through that, I realized science is cool. I got exposed to all these NASA scientists that were doing science on a day-to-day basis. I was flying around on planes doing research. It was awesome. And from there, I said, okay, I'll just be a scientist. And everyone around me had a PhD. They had great mentors in that program. They had a bunch of big-time scientists from NASA, UC Irvine that came to talk to us. So I committed to coming out of that program. I'm going to go do a PhD and I'm going to be a scientist. And that's how I got to Rutgers. That's how I started my PhD program as a scientist. But it never occurred to me it was even a career trajectory before that moment. And then I got into the entrepreneurship thing kind of totally by happenstance during that journey. That's what's got me to being into science as a profession.
All right, so this is so interesting, right? It's something you forgot about, but you put it out there. And you're at a bad moment where you're like, I have nothing.
Right.
Like, I have nothing. Someone calls and you don't even pick it up. What made you really pick it up? Why did you call back? Because it's sort of weird, right? Like you didn't really have any idea who that was. You didn't even remember it. Why did you do it?
You asked that. It was such a good question because I've thought about this forever because it changed the whole trajectory of my life.
100%.
Like that one picking the phone call, I didn't even have to pick it up. And it goes to show like why you pick it up, why you take the shots on goal, because you really never know. And that opened up this whole different path for my life. But I think
say it again. You really never know.
Yeah. 100%.
I don't care how successful anyone is, from Elon Musk to whoever. You don't really know. So it should give people an understanding that just be open to the opportunity. Just pick the call up. You don't have to do it. You don't have to even entertain it.
Right.
But a lot of the times, it comes when you're at your worst moment where you become insular and you sort of, leave the world as far as like what your thoughts and your exciting, future could be. So
right.
Interesting. So cool. So
I've been with my wife since we started dating, like the day we met at Muhlenberg freshman year, and we've been together this whole time. And she always jokes that like I never know where my career is going. I never know where my life is going because just random calls happen, and you don't know what it is or where it's going, but totally changes the trajectory of life. But I'm very open to that, and I think that's important. Is with that call, was seeing it like, let me figure out what's going on here. Who knows?
Well, and, I think with AI and everything that we're going to go through, we'll discuss a little bit about this later. As far as like what jobs are going to be available, you're going to have to be way more open to not knowing. You're going to have to feel that unknown is your friend, which it is because none of us know. So I'm belaboring this point because I think it's a more important point than ever in the history of me being alive. So do you remember the first thing you invented, like that made you think, wow, this is not just a hobby. I'm not just going to be a scientist or teacher because that's what I grew up thinking I was going to be. Do you remember anything that you did?
I've always done a lot of this, just tinkering and building stuff. And story my parents always tell is when I was like 9 or 10 years old, this is when the NHL was doing those expansion, teams all over the place. And in our town, we didn't have a roller hockey league, and I wanted more than anything to play roller hockey. I saw the NJ Rock and Rollers. I saw like the California League with like Valerie Bore and all these awesome guys playing in the summer. And so I created a hockey league, and my whole idea was to go to school, get kids to sign up, have them write checks. We're going to get jerseys and get teams together and organize it. I was like 9 years old, and I orchestrated this whole thing without my parents knowing. And then I started like getting kids to sign up, and it was going well until Mrs. Schulman called my mom and said, Michael's like raising money to like launch a hockey league. And my mom's like, Michael, get in here. And it was like, what are you doing? You're accepting payments? Like, you don't have a bank account. And I was like, I don't know. Like, we'll see where this goes. And my dad actually wound up helping me in the town launch a hockey league right after that. But I created that. A short time after, I had a little trading card business, like selling baseball cards. And I started selling futures contracts on baseball cards to like friends based on like the price of the sports Beckett. Like, oh, you can get this card, but only the increase to next time. And I was like selling contracts. So I was always inventing like cool things, whether it was finance instruments as a 10-year-old or, as a kid too, like building rockets, building models. But really the invention of creating new technology started during my PhD work, where you're exposed to so much that you actually have enough depth of knowledge to say, here's how something's done. I think I can now create something that's better. Didn't really start in a real meaningful commercial way until I was doing my PhD work.
Love it. All right, so there's the entrepreneurial side as much as the science side, which is a unique right-left brain thing that not many people have. Right, it's not so easy to have that combo. And you graduated, you went to Rutgers, and I guess there was this company called Visikol that was a spin out from a Rutgers idea that you did from the ground up being there. So let's talk a little bit about that journey, because now, here you are getting into sort of the area of science in an entrepreneurial way, which sort of combined, these younger days of learning these skills to the point that you can learn them. So how'd that happen? Like give us the happenstance of something like that happens to you when you're at school.
One of the things that allowed it to happen was back in 2012 or so, gas prices were really high. And at the time, the Obama administration started putting out a lot of money for biofuels research, which happened to be the area that I wanted to do research in. I thought was just cool. And so I was able to get a fellowship through the National Science Foundation that paid me to do my PhD work and also gave me a stipend for research and essentially allowed me to be my own boss. I could do whatever research projects I wanted to do, which gave me a lot of freedom and flexibility. So going back to the point before, you have no idea where things are going to go. I mean, the opposite thing is happening right now in the federal administration for funding. But I made use of that opportunity. And during my PhD work, I was trying to turn algae, so like the green pond scum you see, into biodiesel using a process we were working on. And through the project, my advisor said, hey, there's this other PhD student across the street who's also doing chemistry and medicinal products from algae. You should go talk to him. So I walk over there, I set the meeting, his name is Tom, and I start telling him about what I want to do. And he's like, oh, that's a stupid idea. Don't do that. I have this super cool thing I just invented that we should work on. And I've never even met this guy before. He's like, we should do this. And he starts telling me about this technology he invented for imaging tissues. So if you have like a mouse brain or a prostate biopsy, they take a tissue, they cut it into a bunch of thin slices, put them on microscope slides, and a pathologist looks at them. And what Tom had invented was a way to make those tissues totally transparent so you could actually image them in 3D. So he had started developing not just like a chemical reagent, but a microscopy approach and then a digital pathology approach for analyzing this data instead of having like a person looking at a microscope. So transformative technology. And this is 2012 or so, 2013, when I met Tom. And so we started working on it. I thought it was super cool technology. I wasn't a pathologist. I hadn't worked in that space at all outside of like dissecting a few animals. But I dug right in head first. I thought it was so cool. The technology was cool. Not to like be an entrepreneur, but just thought this is super cool and this could change how research is done. And we tried everything. We did like a Kickstarter campaign selling like transparent animals on the internet. And we were trying to figure out where this technology fit in. And what we realized is allowed pharma companies to assess how their therapeutics were doing. So if a pharma company wanted to test out a new drug and see where it's going in a mouse brain, if they want to test a drug and see which cells in a kidney or liver it's affecting, our technology allowed them to look at it and answer questions they couldn't answer before. And so we built a company around this platform. It was a tissue imaging platform. Initially, we were selling reagents and kits online, sold them to thousands of research labs that we were making in Tom's mom's basement. So we really bootstrapped this thing. But in 2016, we raised $500,000 in funding. We got officially started. We
Wait,
left
so you met
Rutgers.
him in 2012,
Yes.
and now it's 4 years later. You guys are labbing out, doing all this research, right? Which just shows nothing happens quickly. You get
Yes.
your first seed investment, right? Half a
Correct.
million bucks. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, it's a funny story. We were working on it for a couple of years, figuring out like where it fits in, what it does, and what the value proposition was. But we couldn't get money. If you're like a 25-year-old tech founder, you're like old. But in the life science space, no companies are started by young people. They're started by faculty with 1,000 publications, enormous labs, and big credibility. Nobody does it in their 20s. Very few people. I mean, like Elizabeth Holmes did it, but she's in prison. Very few people do it. And so we had a tough time raising funds. We pitched like hundreds of times. And eventually, the Lehigh Valley, so Ben Franklin Tech Ventures, offered us $250,000, which really wasn't enough for us to like leave grad school and start this whole thing. But we used it as leverage. I sent an email to the former president of Rutgers, Barchi, and said, "We're leaving the state of New Jersey. We're taking your IP with us, and we're starting this company." And I was kind of like, it was a spiteful thing to do. But at the time, I didn't realize there's like whole departments and groups in the state whose whole job it is to make sure that doesn't happen. So within like 10 minutes, I had like 12 phone calls from people at Rutgers, people from the state. "Hey, you can't do this. This looks awful. Like, don't do this." And then I got a call like another 10 minutes later from the NJ Health Foundation. Never heard of this organization, but they're in New Brunswick, like 100 yards from my lab. And it turns out they write $500,000 checks for startup companies, like the exact dollar figure like we needed. Like it was like a sitcom. And they said, "Can you come over and pitch?" And we're like, "Sure." They're like, "Our board meeting is in an hour. We want you to pitch in an hour." So Tom and I, we jumped in his car. Like I had t-shirts on, a short. He had like shirt with like holes in it from acid stains. And we show up to this board meeting. Everyone's in suits. We pitched. The pitch was awesome. We looked like just slobs though. And I got a call like an hour later from Mike Wiley, and he said, "We want to invest $500,000 in you guys to start this company. We have no idea what you're doing, but we believe in you guys, and we want to put some money behind you." So that gave us our start. We were able to get a lab at the NJII facility in North Brunswick. And then from there, the thing started to accelerate and grow. But yeah, it was initially tough going, just getting off the ground.
Well, and you weren't afraid to make a move like that. That's the thing. Like you spoke up. You had agency for yourself, right? Like you knew you needed to make a move and you did it. But and it's interesting because like I think today in today's day and age, more people know there's more of that in the world
Right.
than there used to be because it was like finding needles in the haystack, right? But I think with technology becoming such a central piece of everyone's life over the last 10 years, I think that's it's still not easy, but at least you know where to at least try to find it, which
Right.
is great. All right, so you raised this first $500,000. What was the gut wrenching, "I don't think this is going to work," the doubt that comes in every night you go home, moments during the $500,000 till the next moment that you're like, "Oh my God, this could work"?
It's tough to articulate how difficult that is if someone hasn't done it, but it's like you have a clock on your wall that says we have 100 days till we run out of cash. So you have a deadline that's ticking until you lose your job. And when you start, it's always saying, okay, well, how are we going to fill that gap? How are we going to keep going? How are we going to keep working? And so I always ask anyone, how do you become a successful entrepreneur? The answer I always say is you got to work 100 hours a week for 5+ years and learn along the way, but there's no guarantee of success. And if you don't want to sign up for that, you won't be successful. And that's what we signed up for. So I had a fantastic co-founder. I mean, we were in it together. We were in the trenches. We argued, we yelled at each other. We were always fighting, but we always were able to work together no matter what happened throughout that whole journey. I mean, traveling all over the world, spending 100 nights a year on the road. But that whole time, it's always there's a gun to your head because you're going to run out of money. At the same time, you have to grow, you have to scale, and you're going to run out of money. So it's trying to thread the needle of going out, raising funds, increasing revenue. We operated as a contract research business. We're doing projects for pharma companies. And initially, it was getting over the hurdle of how do we convince pharma companies to work with two 25-year-old kids and do their most expensive, their most complex, and their most confidential research, because we were early stage. We're trying to figure out which drugs will work. And these are like the trade secrets that Pfizer and Moderna and these companies don't want anybody to know. So work with us. We have no publications, but trust us. And what we did is we went out and we started just giving out free tools to everybody. So try out our reagents, try out our protocols, try out our software. And eventually we started getting dozens and dozens of publications where the biggest researchers in the world were using our technology. They were publishing about it. They were talking about it. And then our first customer, and this is that moment where it's like, this is real, was Allergan, which is now part of AbbVie. They said, hey, we want to do like a $100,000 project with you guys. And it's like, all right, now we're in the big time. We got a 6-figure PO. I don't know how the hell we're going to do the work, but like we did this. Like we actually won this. And we started picking up steam. We started getting staff. Our staff early days was awesome. We were able to grow and scale, but there was always problems. We had $1 million microscope break in the middle of the night. Can't afford a service contract. Generators breaking, and you have to drive to the lab at 2:00 in the morning and make sure all of your antibodies don't die in the freezer. So there was always struggles. We had a big flood at some point. We had a fire. All these terrible things that happened again and again and again. But really, the part that kept me up at night was COVID. We were going into 2020. We were crushing it. First 2 months of the year, we were doing like $300,000, $400,000 a month in revenue, and it was just rapidly accelerating. And then COVID happened. Every single one of our clients pulled all their contracts, and we stopped dead in a single day in March, like end of March. At the same time, my first kid was born, and it was like, oh my God, this whole thing is going to collapse. And we picked up all the steam. We focused inwards and said, let's do R&D, let's develop new tools. And when this comes back, we're going to be ready. We didn't lay off anybody during COVID. And then a day in June, it seemed like every consultant in the world told pharma companies, outsource, because you can't expect your people to come back, but contract research organizations can. And every pharma company in the world said, we need big projects and we need them tomorrow. And we started accelerating dramatically June of 2020. And then ultimately sold the business in May of 21. But throughout that whole period,
could have given up. You could have said it's over.
Yeah, no, I thought it was.
Retail firms that 100% of their revenue was gone. Like, if you're a restaurant, and all types of businesses had to get through it. It was everyone's Rudy moment who lasted, right? Like they didn't, or Rocky moment, which, they got through it and they survived, and then you sold. So why did you sell? Like what made you feel it was time?
It's a deeply personal answer, because when I first started getting into this, I thought if you're the CEO of a company and you have an asset that's growing 20% or more per year, you would be literally insane to sell the thing. But what I come to find out later is you're not actually in control. So you don't actually control the company as much as you'd like for, the micro reasons within the company, board and all that stuff, but also the macro. Like I was in no control of what happened with COVID. And it also, you get to a point where you realize that if I keep going, there's this big risk. So we could go 5 more years, another COVID could happen, something bad could happen. And it's not worth it. And it's the bird in the hand versus two in the bush parable, where I felt at that point in time that we had earned enough, the company was worth enough, where it didn't make sense to keep going for another 5 years to get slightly more money in our pockets. At the same time, I had personally had it. I mean, the COVID thing of, at one point, everyone forgets this, but we had mandated in the state that the government, the state police could come in and actually seize your goods. So as a life science company, they could take our gloves, they could take our pipette tips. They repealed the legal search and seizure, and we were hiding gloves and pipette tips in our drop ceiling and our lab. So like going through the Great Resignation, going through all these problems, I was more or less done. I said that we made the impact. We've had thousands of publications. We've gotten many drugs to market through what we're doing. I'm personally done. But the biggest thing was I was looking at the market. I went to my co-founder. I said, dude, we're in a bubble. And he's like, no, we're not in a bubble. I'm like, no, we're not this smart. Things aren't booming like this forever. And in right this moment, our company is valued based upon the rate at which we're growing, not our revenue, not our EBITDA. We could grow for 2 more years, 5 more years, double our revenue, and be worth less than we are today. So why keep going? And our board fought us hard on this of no, keep going,
And
keep
not even
going.
and we didn't know about rates either. I mean, like
Correct.
that was the second quiver.
Correct. And so when our board, half our board members said, all right, if you guys think this is what you want to do, we'll support you. We've made a bunch of money on this. Let's go forward. A bunch of our board members didn't want to go forward with it, but ultimately we sold the company. And looking back now, like life science has collapsed in a large part in the market we were in, which is early discovery. VC money's collapsed, private equity money's collapsed. I mean, equalizing a little bit to pre-pandemic levels, but the valuation that we would have gotten would be today at least half of what it was back in 21.
Oh
So in
yeah.
retrospect, we made the right decision, but it was a tough one.
Well, listen, you had other reasons, right? And let's talk about the next thing. You went to NJII. Like, what makes you do that? Obviously, you're still very young, and why not go and bat your head up against the wall with something else?
Again, you never know where life takes you. So once we sold the company, this is still the bubble. So the company that bought us, they said, hey guys, go out and buy other companies. They gave us a blank check to go buy other stuff, which was fun. It was a blast, like an awesome honeymoon period after we sold the company. One company I bought was called Hurel. Hurel was a cell culture drug discovery company in Jersey, in Newark, in the New Jersey Innovation Institute's incubator,
Yeah.
which is now at the Profeta Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So I went there when we were doing the transaction and I thought, all right, what's this NJII thing? So I met the president. I learned a little bit about the organization and I put it in my head. And I actually told my wife on the drive home, like, this organization's super cool. I'd love to work with them one day. And I filed that away like in 2022. And then after we sold the company, it's really different running a company you used to own because I stayed on versus running a company you do own. And I just wasn't in it. At the same time, the market was falling apart, just super not fun to run the business anymore. And not what I was looking for. And I knew I'd move on at some point in time. So once our earnout contracts were up, once our obligations were up with the transaction, I was going to start looking for new stuff. And like the day I was going to start, the recruiter reached out to me from NJIT and said, hey, we have this role as president of NJI. And I was like, I know exactly who NJI was. I'd love to work with you guys. So it was like perfect fit, perfect time. I almost did my PhD at NJIT, so very familiar with the university, very familiar with what they're doing, very familiar with NJI, and it was right place, right time. I also contractually at the time was prevented from going into life sciences, and it was like, perfect because NJI had just sold off their life science business like 6 months before. So it was like perfect role, perfect time. And for me, what I'm most passionate about is getting technology into the world, turning into products and services. And that is exactly the mission of NJI. So super opportunistic, super perfect
And
timing.
someone called you again, like
Right.
indirect tap. It's amazing how the right things show up when you're ready to make a move if you just allow it. So, what do you think is missing from today's startup ecosystem? That you figured out, I guess, the hard way, right? Like what do you think is in this changing environment now that's so fast paced?
Well, if you look at any innovation ecosystem, the most important part are the founders, the people who build these companies. They're a rare asset because they're strange people. I'm one of them. They're abnormal people that have extremely high risk tolerances. They don't care about waiting for things for the long term. They take zero salary for multiple years. I mean, who does that? It's crazy. They're rare people. And when you look at New Jersey or any state, the states that succeed are the ones that are able to keep those people in the state, but also keep utilizing them for more startups, for more mentoring. So if you look at New Jersey, we've recently changed our tax policy around things like QSBS, where before we were incentivized as founders, if you did a company in New Jersey, you sure as heck wouldn't do the next one in Jersey just because the taxes alone. You'd go to Texas or wherever, where it has more favorable tax implications. So that's first and foremost. And I think for us as a state, we have to cherish those people, provide them with tax incentives, provide them with whatever value we can to keep them. And I think some people view it as anyone can be an entrepreneur. I view it more as like the Ayn Rand version of this, where it's like, no, these are really special people. I don't know why they're special, where they come from, but we have to cherish those people, work with them, and figure out exactly how we best support them. So that's first and foremost. Next is funding. New Jersey lags behind New York, it lags behind Boston in funding from VCs. And it's how do we create connections to those more metropolitan areas to get investors into the state. And I think the Murphy administration has done a great job with the strategic innovation centers that they're doing, where we have 12 of these across the state now. We're trying to build ecosystems where people can live, they can work, where funding can get there, and it's all in one place. Before, we didn't have any of that. I mean, complete fragmented state between higher ed and some spaces to work, some spaces to
Well,
live.
it's like you said before, being able to find it, right?
Right.
Like having it be a peer in a way that you can, if you're a founder, you can see where it is and how to get there.
Right. But I think the founder part is the most important, and really putting a lot more emphasis on that as a state is critical.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's going to be important and even more important moving forward. I
Right.
mean, the competition and the recreation of things. I mean, everything. Just how we're, using it today. It's like I feel like, and I say this a lot. We're like at "Hello, you've got mail," right?
Right.
I really do. I think
Right.
that's where we are. So very cool, and I know you do a great job, and it's such an important thing you're doing now, candidly, is awareness and driving innovation to our state. So important for jobs and just everything.
Right.
But, it's not like you're not busy enough. What makes you now write this book, 1% Dad, which I love the title. Uh, Obviously, you have fond memories of your parents and your dad. So I know it's about fatherhood, fitness, ambition. You know, what made you do this and at this time in your life, really, candidly? That's, normally people write books when they're like
Older.
retired.
Well, everyone thinks a PhD and a scientist does science, but most of the art of being a scientist is actually writing. So whether it's grant proposals or publications, like
Okay.
80% of your time, 90% of the time is writing. So for me, going through my PhD, I got a lot better at writing. I love writing, and I've always wanted to write a book. And it was always, how do I write something people actually want to read? Because as a scientist, no one reads anything. My dad came to my dissertational defense for my PhD and fell asleep in the back. So like even my own father doesn't want to hear about my science or my publications, but I wanted to write something people actually wanted to read. And I've had this feeling for a long time that guys today, especially millennials, especially young fathers, are struggling. You look at quality of life, you look at the standard of living, it's been declining precipitously for the last 20, 30 years. Example I always use of this is Homer Simpson. Love The Simpsons growing up as a kid. And Homer was this guy who we all wanted to do better than. But Homer was, a guy who lived in a house. His wife didn't work. He had 3 kids. He had a nice house, acre of property, and he was a blue collar worker that afforded that. In New Jersey, to afford the median house, you have to make $200,000 a year. That puts Homer Simpson in the top 1% of New Jersey as a 25 to 45-year-old. Things are much tougher now. They're much more difficult. And fathers often are struggling in silence. We don't talk to each other anymore. We're not doing bowling night. We're not really going to the bar. We're too damn busy for any of that stuff. And yet we see everybody else, this like curated avatar of their life, where we feel like, what the hell am I doing wrong? Like, how bad are things? And when I look around, like playing men's league hockey in a locker room, guys don't look good. They don't sound good. They look terrible. They're out of shape. They're depressed. They're anxious. And I wanted to write a book to help with that. It's the overarching societal trend, especially with young dads, of how do you balance all the things in your life, but not only balance, how do you excel in all these different dimensions? It's really easy to be a good CEO and work 120 hours a week, but you're terrible at every other dimension of your life. So how do you improve in all those dimensions? And that's what led me to write the book. It has a big focus on fitness, which is super important to me. And for fathers, I mean, we don't look good. We look bad. We're 50, 60 pounds overweight on average. We're not in good shape, and that catches up to you. So I wanted to write a book to help with that, to help fathers excel in all the dimensions of their life. And so far, it's been out a week and a half. I've gotten super great feedback. I've been over 100 copies sold in the first week. And just really happy with the progress so far and feedback. But that's why I wrote it.
Was there a section of the book that felt risky, vulnerable to publish? Because this is not a book about how to be better. It is, but like not in the business world. It's the more personal world, and not everyone has the ability to open up in that way. So, did you ever find a section that was hard to publish?
It's really the whole book. A pet peeve of mine, I read all the time, and there's books behind me, illustrates the point, but I read all these biographies about Elon Musk or Warren Buffett or whomever, and they talk about their life in this like very linear fashion of like, the company failed and I started this new one and this thing happened. And it's like, well, what did you feel during that period of time? Like, did you want to blow your brains out? Like, were you depressed? Like, what was going on? And you read these and they leave out all those details. So I wrote the book intentionally. I wanted to take people through that whole journey. So for me, like in being a father, how did I do a bad job? And being a husband and running a company, what were the things that I did awful? And reflecting on those, even talking about my own journey with health, talking through what terrible mistakes I've made, what times I've had to have interactions with healthcare professionals, and what is that like? I have a little section there on mental health of how do you deal with anxiety and depression as a leader of a business? Where do you go? Where do you talk to? And a big theme recurrent in the book is on this feeling of isolation that a lot of us have today, where we're never more connected, but we're also never more isolated. Like, part of the reason I find that so many people are depressed and anxious is because they frankly have no clue what other people are doing. Like, I don't know what other fathers are doing. They spend time with their kids at night. They not. You have guilt about not spending enough time, about working too much, not making enough money. We don't talk to each other. And when we do talk to each other, it's not honest. So in the book, I really wanted to be honest. I really wanted to talk about all these difficult themes. So when someone reads it, they're like, oh man, yeah, I feel that too. I've never heard someone actually say it quite like that. So that's a huge focus of the book.
I love it. I'm thinking as you're talking, I mean, golf, working out, we discussed this before, like joining clubs and joining things. Forget the family part, because that's another thing, right? Where you're around like-minded people that's not like where you need a result, like where you need to make money. Like, I get asked all the time, like, how are you making money on this podcast? I'm like, I'm not making money on this podcast. I love doing this podcast. I get to have a conversation with you today, and I'm learning, and I'm feeling like I'm connecting, and I'm sharing, and I'm creating, and I'm solving a lot. Like, I'm curious all the time. So I get to find out whatever I want to talk to and find out about and be curious about it. And it gives me energy, right? So I think we all need to find that, which you're basically saying that in a way that we lost that a little bit due to the busyness, the phones, just everything we do. We sort of like we're in a cocoon and we got to break out of it, right? And do things. So interesting. Was there a moment during the writing process you're like, nah, that, like, doubting yourself? You're like, what am I doing? Who's gonna care? Who am I? What makes me the one that can even write this book? I'm an idiot for even like attempting this. Like, how many times during this book did you feel that?
I've gotten good at turning that voice off in my head. So like it always pops up. And I'm like, that thing is always there. Just like turn off. But yeah, no, you definitely get that. I got that with this book.
All right, but no, I'm stopping you right there, because I think the question was about what you just answered in a way that everyone wants to figure out. How do you turn that voice off? Because anything that we're going to do, we need to feel we can.
I got a good answer to this one. So this is one of my favorite tools. I talk about this in the book of whenever I feel anxious, whenever there's like a big decision, I don't know what the heck to do. People stew on that. It eats them up. They can't sleep. I will sit down. I'll go to like a Starbucks. I'll go to a public place or a park, and I'll write down in a journal, why am I anxious? What's the problem? What are the solutions? What's the worst thing that can happen? Like a very stoicism-based approach to it. And then I'll say, okay, based on this information, here's what I'm going to do. And that like thought process of writing this down, super helpful. It allows me to come to like a concrete solution. But what's even more important is that I look back at that journal. And when I look back at March of 2020 and I say, my business is going to collapse, my son is being born tomorrow, the hospitals are closing, my wife's going to have to deliver a baby on her own. And I'm like, well, all those things that I was fearful of didn't happen. My wife and my son are doing great. I sold my business 14 months later for way more money than I expected. So it builds that resilience muscle where I'm like, yeah, you doubted yourself. And I see it again and again and again. So I have those doubts. I put them on paper. I look back at them in the future, and it like builds a resilience muscle. But with the book, I had that thought early on. And one of the things I did, I started sending it out to friends of mine. Like, here's this draft. Tell me what you think. And like sometimes you get crickets. Some people are like, oh, it sounds great. They didn't read it. A guy I played football with in college, he's like, hey, can I call you? And I haven't talked to him in 10 plus years. And he gets on the phone. No, we're on Zoom. And I'm like, Matt, you look terrible. And like, you shouldn't say it to somebody, but we're friends. He's bright red. He looks like he gained 150 pounds. It tells me he gained 150 pounds. He's bright red, and all these things have come up in his life, and he's out of shape. And he read my book, and it spoke to him. He read the whole thing over a weekend, and he went to the gym on Monday morning. And I was like, okay, if that had that impact on this guy, and it's one of the 100 people I sent out to, it's worth writing this book. And here's a guy that goes to the church every single day. He's there for his kids. He coaches. He's doing great as a CPA. He's doing great in all these different dimensions of his life. But fitness is where he's struggling, and this book helped him. So I was like, all right, no matter what happens, whatever doubts I have, this book needs to go forward.
That's amazing. It's funny because when I first did the podcast, I'm like, I'll be happy if just my family listens to it. No, because I didn't want to set any expectations of what it would feel like not to be something that never really happens anyway.
Right.
Like, so you nailed it with that. And I think that's tremendous. So I have a cool question before we move to ending this amazing podcast. I'm so happy I did this. So if you could spend 1 hour with your 25-year-old self the day you launched Visikol, what would you say to someone? What would you say to yourself?
Probably buy Bitcoin. What would I say?
What would you say?
A better way to answer the question is people always ask me, like, what mistakes did you make that you wish you didn't make?
Yeah.
During the Visikol journey and running a company and starting it and selling it, I didn't make any big mistakes. I made a lot of small mistakes. And my co-founder and I had a good relationship. We were able to bounce ideas back and forth off each other in a very academic way and figure out okay, what are the big risks? What are the things we shouldn't do? What things could just cripple and kill our company? And let's not do those things. But I don't know. I don't know if I would change anything about the journey. I feel like going through what I went through was such a learning experience, and how to hire people, how to motivate people, how to work with investors, how to talk to companies. I don't know if I could.
What you said is very it's why I ask it. What you just said is, even as an entrepreneur, you have to be really calculated in your risk. Everyone thinks entrepreneurs are out of their minds and risk doesn't matter. But no, the greatest entrepreneurs in my mind basically had a risk tolerance and a risk mitigation strategy the whole way through to not be where everything would blow up, right? As much as it looks like they're just shooting for the stars and nothing really matters and they don't really have a plan, which is the complete opposite.
One thing I probably would say is to get a mentor earlier. I got a mentor probably 2 years into it, which was super helpful. And it's a funny story is that the guy, when I was doing my PhD, I was working part-time in a lab and worked there for about 1.5 years. And one day the boss guy who owns the company comes in and he fires me. And the reason he fires me, he wanted full-time help and he canned me. And didn't think much of it, but about 5 years later, when we're raising a round of funding for Visikol, $800,000 round of funding, we needed help to become a contract research business, a service business, and do proper types of research and quality. And I was like, why don't I call the guy who fired me? And so I call him up, and he had since sold the company for a huge amount of money, just a large amount of money. And he's like, all right, I'll meet you tomorrow on the side of the Garden State Parkway. We met a rest stop. And I meet him there, and I start telling him about what we're doing, and we talk, and it's 3 hours later. And he's like, how much do you need? I was like, I need $800K. The next morning, he gave us a contract for $800,000 investment into our company. And he became a mentor to us. So I pick up my phone. I would speak to him 3-4 hours a day. Hey, this is what's happening. Here's a decision. And he could tell me, I did A, B, C, and D. And here's what happened in each of those. And here's what you should think about. He was so damn helpful through that process. But it was finding somebody who had literally done the exact same thing I was trying to do and could walk me through it. There's all these entrepreneurs who give you feedback, but haven't done it themselves. There's people who are experts in life sciences that work at big pharma companies, but they've never run a company in the space. So finding him was critical to our success. And I would say get that sooner. Should have been obvious.
I love it. I think and get as many of them as you possibly can, right? Because they're all going to help you. They want to have impact. That's the whole thing. It's like Charlotte's Web. Find as many people that want to have impact as a mentor in your life that actually are strategic. And it's in for every part of your life, personal, and business. So thanks for being on the show. This is going to be a great episode for everyone to learn a lot of valuable lessons. And 1% Dad, where is it? Amazon? Where can people buy this book?
It's on Amazon. So yeah, Jeff Bezos and the team have it ready for you if you want to get it.
There you go. All right, good. So thank you again.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it.
That was Dr. Michael Johnson, a builder, scientist, and a systems thinker who is making big moves where it matters most. What I loved about this conversation is how grounded he is. Whether he's talking about selling a company, writing a book, or rethinking how we train the next generation of talent, He brings clarity, humility, and vision. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's trying to build something bigger than themselves, or someone who thinks success shouldn't happen overnight. As always, I appreciate you being on this journey with me. This is the John Schultz Podcast, Myth of Overnight Success. See you next time.